Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to today's episode of Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. Joining me today, best-selling author Michael Grunwald, who is out with a brand new, very important book. It's called We Are Eating the Earth, the race to fix our food system and save our climate. Great conversation with Mike about his new book, which comes out July 1st. You can get it now, and you can jump to the conversation if you'd like to skip the news. It starts at 54 minutes into today's show. Big, long news segment for you. But first, I do have your top headlines and a whole bunch of clips from the weekend that are important that you're going to want to hear, I think. And I hope you had a good weekend. I hope you did good things and ate good things and saw people and relaxed, hopefully. I had a great time with my high school pals at Stang Bang, our annual high school get-together. We had lots of fun. There were no major injuries, just a bunch of great male bonding and people, just old men falling asleep early. It was good. We had a great time. So thank you very much for joining me today. Lots to discuss about what transpired over the weekend. All eyes were on Southern California because of the unrest and protests as a result of the continued Trump regime ICE detentions and everything around their efforts to turn America into a police state, a fascist state. We are there. We are seeing it in so many different ways. The hallmarks have arrived, and it is not fun. I'll get to the news out of Southern California and everything else, but before anything, let's get the obligatory reminder from our friend and farmer Kevin Richburg at Slate Hill Edible Forest, who reminds us of this.
The only story that matters is that Trump is neurologically unfit to be president, a position that comes with nuclear weapons. In the bowels of the night, he posted on social media his congratulations to the California National Guard on a great job and a job well done following the protests in Southern California. Not a single member of the National Guard had at that point yet been deployed in Los Angeles. The only story that matters is that dementia, in all of its forms, in all the people it inhabits, is disqualifying to be president of the United States. We literally just litigated this to a repetitiously nauseating degree on a ship that had long since sailed and is nowhere near sight of the harbor anymore.
Kevin Richburg, always great, and hopefully we'll see him tonight. That's Monday night, 8 p.m. East at the Hangout that I host bi-weekly, Monday and Thursday. Always a great time. Kevin is almost always there, and he'll have more then. I hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. East. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and read today's dispatch from Heather Cox Richardson of Letters from an American, who writes, flatbed train cars carrying thousands of tanks rolled into Washington, D.C. yesterday in preparation for the military parade planned for June 14th. On the other side of the country, protesters near Los Angeles filmed officers with Immigration and Customs Enforcement throwing flashbang grenades into a crowd of protesters. The two images make a disturbing portrait of the United States of America under Donald J. Trump regime, as Trump tries to use the issue of immigration to establish a police state. Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's trying to use this issue to establish a police state. And of course, she mentions smartly back in January 2024, when Joe Biden was still president, Trump pressured Republican lawmakers to kill a bipartisan immigration measure that would have beefed up border security and funding immigration courts because he wanted to campaign on the issue of immigration. During that campaign, Trump made much of the high immigration numbers in the United States after the worst of coronavirus pandemic, when the booming U.S. economy attracted migrants. He went so far as to claim that migrants were eating people's pets. Yeah, well, the crackdowns have begun. They began as soon as Trump took office. The regime led by Stephen Miller, who is as evil as it comes, says they want to get up to 300, a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day. According to a recent report by Goldman Sachs, undocumented immigrants made up more than 4% of the nation's workforce in 2023 and are concentrated in landscaping, farm work, and construction work. Sweeps of workplaces where immigrants are concentrated are an easy way to meet these quotas. Heather Cox Richardson goes on to write that the Trump regime apparently decided to demonstrate its power in Los Angeles, where over the course of the past week, hundreds of undocumented immigrants who went to scheduled check-in appointments with ICE were taken into custody, sometimes with their families, and held in the basement of this facility in downtown L.A. This was the backdrop when, on Friday of this week, federal officials launched a new phase of the regime's crackdown on immigration, focusing on L.A. workplaces. Agents in tactical gear sweeping through the city's garment district met protesters who chanted and threw eggs. Agents pepper sprayed the protesters and shot at them with what are known as less lethal projectiles or non-lethal bullets because they were made of rubber or plastic, apparently. Protesters also gathered around the federal detention center, demanding the release of their relatives. Officers in riot gear dispersed the crowd with tear gas. At 10:33 a.m. yesterday, that is Sunday morning, before anything was going on in Los Angeles, Stephen Miller reposted a clip of protesters surrounding the federal detention center in Los Angeles and wrote that these protesters constituted an insurrection against the laws and sovereignty of the United States because he is dying to invoke the Insurrection Act to use the military against Americans, of course. But they are making a much bigger deal out of what is happening there than is actually happening. They're using videos and images from past riots, as a matter of fact, are being shared by anyone from Senator Ted Cruz to any other right-wing person and scaring the hell out of people. You know, about 4 million people live in Los Angeles, apparently, more than 12 million in the greater LA area, making the protests relatively small, according to Heather Cox Richardson. Nonetheless, on Saturday evening, Trump signed an order saying that to the extent that the protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. So based on that stupid and weak finding, he called out at least 2,000 members of the California National Guard to protect ICE and other government personnel, activating a state National Guard without request from its governor for the first time in 50 years. Again, this hasn't happened in 50 years where the National Guard was called out by the president without a request from the governor. The last time I think was like in Alabama by LBJ. So then last night, Trump starts posting again and says at about 8:30, if Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles can't do their jobs, which everyone knows they can, then the federal government will step in and solve the problem. Riots and looters, the way it should be solved. Well, California's Governor Gavin Newsom said Trump's plan was, quote, purposely inflammatory. LA authorities are available to access law enforcement assistance at a moment's notice, Newsom said. We're in close coordination with the city and county, and there's no current unmet need. The National Guard has been admirably serving LA throughout the recovery from the fires. This is the wrong mission and will erode public trust, Newsom said. The administration is trying not to meet an unmet need, but to manufacture a crisis. And it couldn't have been too much of a crisis because Trump wasn't really too concerned about the rebellion. He went to the UFC fight in New Jersey by 10 p.m. on Saturday night. And now here's the craziest thing, and Kevin referenced this just moments ago. At 2:40 a.m., Trump's social media account said, great job by the National Guard in Los Angeles. After 2 days of violence, clashes, and unrest, we have an incompetent Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass who are, as usual, unable to handle the task. These radical left protesters by instigators and often paid troublemakers will not be tolerated. Again, thank you to National Guard for a job well done. Well, an hour later, at 3:22 a.m., the mayor of Los Angeles posted, I want to thank the LAPD and local law enforcement for their work tonight. I also want to thank Governor Gavin Newsom for his support. Just to be clear, the National Guard has not been deployed in the city of Los Angeles. So the president is saying, good job, National Guard, and the mayor of LA is like, they didn't do anything. They're on standby. So, you know, you couldn't be blamed for not knowing exactly what's happening in Los Angeles. Even if you lived in Los Angeles, I think that's part of the plan. And we're seeing it unfold pretty rapidly in Southern California over the weekend. I'm looking forward to talking with you about it at our hangout tonight. Of course, there is other news and lots of it, and I want to get to those headlines right now. ABC News suspended Terry Moran after the Trump administration condemned a post that he put up on the social media platform X In the missive, which was posted shortly after midnight, Terry Moran of ABC said that both Trump and Miller are world-class haters. For Trump, he said hatred is only a means to an end, and that his end is his own glorification. That's his spiritual nourishment. But for Stephen Miller, Terry Moran said, hatreds are his spiritual nourishment. He eats his hate. It's a pretty harsh opinion. It's completely accurate and actually poignant. But on Sunday morning, Trump administration officials condemned Terry Moran, said the Post reflected poorly on ABC News as an institution. And about an hour later, the news division at ABC News said that their senior national correspondent and former Nightline anchor had been suspended. So, interesting story and development over the weekend. And how about this? A salmonella outbreak has linked to eggs, sickened dozens of people across 7 states. More than 70 people across 7 states have been sickened due to a salmonella outbreak linked to eggs recalled by a California-based egg distributor, according to the CDC. So I guess the CDC is still catching salmonella. Of the 79 people sick, and 21 people have been hospitalized. No deaths have been reported. I got salmonella from Taco Bell. Have you ever heard about that story? That's right. Back in 1995, won a class action lawsuit and got about $1,500, which was, I'd take salmonella for $1,500 right now. Okay. I wouldn't. Please don't give me salmonella. All right. Russia has bombarded Ukraine's second largest city with massive strikes in the early hours Saturday, said its mayor. One night after Moscow carried out one of the war's largest aerial assaults in Ukraine. So the violence continues terribly in Ukraine and Russia. U.S. measles cases are nearing a 30-year high. How about that? The number of measles cases in the U.S. so far has quadrupled compared to 2024 and is nearing a 30-year high. I can't imagine what the reason is for it. There have been 1,168 confirmed cases across 33 states nationwide. Again, this is coming from the CDC, so I don't know how the CDC is functioning, how accurate it is, but those are the numbers as of today. Palestinians say that at least 5 people were killed by Israeli gunfire near Gaza aid centers yesterday, and a flotilla carrying humanitarians delivering Gaza-bound aid has been seized. Israeli military ordered to block the aid flotilla carrying Greta Thunberg and many other humanitarians who were trying to bring attention and aid into Gaza. Kilmar Abrego Garcia is back. Hey, I called it right for once. The wrongly deported man is back in the U.S. to face charges of smuggling and other charges. But the Maryland man at the center of this bitter, months-long political and legal fight after he was mistakenly deported to El Salvador has been returned to the United States to face these criminal charges, according to an indictment announced on Friday. I think that's a pretty big deal. Also in San Antonio, they've got a new mayor, Gina Ortiz Jones. Pretty interesting. I was reading about her. She's set to become the next mayor of San Antonio, and I thought that was worth mentioning as well. All right, well, those are just some of the headlines from over the weekend. A lot of attention obviously being paid to Los Angeles, but you let me know what I've missed. I'm sure it is plenty. There are plenty of stories that are worth mentioning, and people send them to me every day. Keep them coming. standupwithpete@gmail.com is my email. But now I've got to get to the sound bites, the clips. It's time for the clip show, and I've got a hell of a clip show for you today, meaning a lot of different clips from all over the place. But let's start with Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, yesterday talking exclusively to MSNBC's Jacob Soboroff. Let's take a listen to a little of that.
There's a pretty good chance that in the White House there might be a television on and he might be watching us
I hope so.
right now.
Yeah, he can learn something.
What might you say to him if I'll give you the floor, you have the opportunity, what you weren't able to say to him on that phone call or calls that he hasn't taken today?
Where's your decency, Mr. President? Stop. Rescind this order. It's illegal and unconstitutional. And I said it. I'll say it again. It's immoral. You're creating the conditions that you claim you're solving, and you're not. And you're putting real people's lives at risk. This is a serious moment, and it requires serious leadership. And it's time for you to be a commander-in-chief of the United States of America. And I will have your back if you want to work in a relationship of trust and truth in the spirit of our founding fathers. But you come after poor kids, you come after families, we will do everything in our power to stand up and stand in your way.
A little bit more from Gavin Newsom.
The hell are they doing? It's been here 10 years. The fear, the horror The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. You know, I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
All right. Looks like he wants to be arrested by Tom Homan is who he's referring to right there. And so I don't know if that's going to diffuse anything. I'm not sure about that, Governor Newsom, but we'll see. He is standing strong out there in California. All right, let's check in with the great Keith Boykin, who does an awesome series of which should win awards. He does it on Instagram, and I've appeared with him on panels at CNN. He's a real smart guy. Here is Keith Boykin in these streets in L.A.
At the federal building in Los Angeles, where Trump's immigration agents have reportedly detained hundreds of people in a basement this week. ICE agents raided several locations here in L.A. County in the past few days, and protesters have pushed back, prompting Trump to call up the National Guard. But just as we saw with the wildfires in January, there's a lot of misinformation going around, so I want to clear up a few things. Number one, L.A. is not out of control, and most of the area is not seeing protests. Los Angeles County is huge, covering more than 4,000 square miles with nearly 10 million residents. It holds the largest population of any county in America. So most LA residents are watching this on TV, not witnessing it in person. Number two, Los Angeles City Mayor Karen Bass is not the mayor of Los Angeles County, where the protest took place Saturday in Paramount. L.A. County is governed by a separate board of supervisors. The L.A. City population is 3.8 million people compared to 9.6 million in L.A. County. That means 60% of the population of this county does not fall under the mayor's jurisdiction. Number three, despite all these high-profile raids with masked ICE agents, the Trump administration is actually deporting fewer people per month than the Biden administration did last year. Trump has been slow to release new numbers, but the most recent monthly data shows ICE deported 11,000 people in February of this year compared to 12,000 deported in February 2024 under Biden. And somehow Biden did that without raiding Home Depot parking lots to pick up Hispanic day laborers. That's why White House official Stephen Miller set a new quota for ICE to arrest 3,000 people a day, even though they don't have the capacity to hold them anywhere. Since they don't have the numbers, they've got to create the drama. And we all know Trump loves drama. Number four, although the convicted criminal in the White House likes to pretend that he's doing all this to keep you safe, most of the people being arrested have no criminal record. Trump officials claim otherwise, but their own statistics disprove their argument. In fact, immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, are actually less likely to commit crimes than U.S.-born citizens. What the Trump administration is doing, though, is taking people who were legally residing in the U.S. under presidential orders for temporary protected status, suddenly revoking their status, and then going to their immigration hearings and arresting them as they walk out the door, according to immigration attorney Alan Orr. And then they're stuffing them into overcrowded facilities with no beds and forcing them to sleep on concrete floors. It's all a part of the great stunt queen's campaign to fool his cult followers with shock and awe, especially now that he was forced to return wrongly deported Maryland resident Kilmar Abrego Garcia from El Salvador. And you, the taxpayer, are paying the bill for this charade. So instead of de-escalating, Trump is now calling out the National Guard to provoke a fight. The same guy who refused to lift a finger to stop a deadly insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th and then pardon the violent criminals who tried to overthrow the U.S. government. This is America.
This is America indeed. So is this. This kid went viral for these brief comments to a local L.A. affiliate.
You told me you got caught up in the tear gas as well. Describe what happened to you.
Oh, just tasted a little tear gas. Tasted like fascism.
Yeah, tasted like fascism. That kid went viral for those comments, which I love. How about this? This is University of Minnesota graduate student who had been held in ICE custody since late March. He was released in May 22nd. A federal judge ruled this week that his detention violated his procedural due process rights under the Fifth Amendment and ordered his release. The Department of Homeland Security was seeking to deport him because of a drunk driving conviction. Well, the 28-year-old pled guilty to gross misdemeanor DWI last year following a June 23 incident in Minnesota. He's a Turkish citizen. He had been detained in Minnesota since March 27th. His name is Dagukin Gunadin. I don't know if I'm saying that right. University of Minnesota graduate student who had been held in custody, and I thought he was pretty poignant. So I wanted to share this so we all could know exactly what's going on, because I thought this was pretty revealing and heartbreaking, of course, and very, very angering.
And then I would like to leave to see my dog. First of all, I am relieved to be released, but I am deeply troubled and harmed by this clear violation of my constitutional right for due process. It took 56 days to undo something that should not have happened in the first place. 56 days, I did not see the sun or the sky. For weeks, I was detained with my charges dismissed, bond granted, or no pending trial or hearing. I am disappointed in the integrity of the system and individuals that allowed this to happen. I can stand here today thanks to the tremendous support and love the community has shown me. I am grateful for each and every person, but I especially want to thank my lawyer, Hannah, and her co-counsel, Kelsey, for their incredible work. I want to tell to all international students to know this. While there might be some who want to scare us by abusing the power of their office, there are many more who welcome us and fight alongside us to defend our rights. My only hope is that no one, including those who did this to me, suffer such injustice. This country deserves much better. Let's not forget, it's not liberty and justice for some, but it is for all.
Very well spoken from that graduate student, and I thought that was really important. Now, here's another similar story or victim of these raids and sweeps. His name is Marcelo Gomez. He is 18 years old. He's a junior in high school in Massachusetts. He's originally from Brazil. He came to America when he was 6. His parents brought him here. He was held at an ICE facility in Burlington, Vermont after his arrest on May 31st. Agents were looking for his father, but when they found his student visa had expired several years ago, he was taken into custody. Here he is with his Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton by his side after he had been released.
But I want to say that place, it's not good. It's not good. Ever since I got here, they had me in handcuffs. They put me downstairs, and I was in a room with a bunch of 35-year-old men. And those rooms were small compared to the size of, like, how many men were there. There was, like, 40 men in there. We would barely get any attention from the people there. It would be really hard. I haven't showered in 6 days. I haven't done anything. The only thing I could do is thank God every day, because that's all I would do. I would pray there. I would talk about the Bible to them. So this right here is a bracelet that a Brazilian friend made me there. This is how we sleep. This is our blanket. They give us a really long sheet of this thin aluminum, I'm guessing, and we lay down on the concrete floor and put that over us and just sleep through the night. For me to say the Pledge of Allegiance at my school every single day and not have a Bible in a federal agency place, it's horrible. It doesn't make sense to me, because, like, to me, I always choose God first, and that's all I did there. I would pray. It's not a good place. Like I said, all glory goes to God, and I heard a lot of people talk bad about my dad, but if you want to talk bad about my dad, you have to talk bad about me, because he raised me. And if I have so much support from everyone from my town, then he doesn't deserve any hate, because I was raised from him. Like, everything I got was from my dad. He's a good person. He never did anything wrong. He's a nice guy. I'm very grateful for all the support, more than anything in this world. I didn't specifically know about my immigration status because I came here when I was 6 years old. And when I got here, the woman said, she was like, do you know why you're arrested? And I said, no, I don't. She said, because you overstayed your visa. You came here in 2013, and in 2015 you overstayed it. And I told her, I was like, ma'am, I was 7 years old. Like, I don't know nothing about that stuff. Like, I don't understand how it works. And she was the only person in that place that was, like, on. Like, I understand. Like, I get it. She was the only nice security, one of the only nice security guards. There was this other guy that would let me use the phone at night sometimes to talk to my parents. Those two people mean the world to me. The world.
And your dad, how are you feeling about your dad's status and what's going to happen to him?
I don't want anyone to touch my dad. I want my dad. My dad would call me at night with my brother and sister, and he wouldn't stop crying. And he would talk about how, like, he can't even go outside. Like, why? Like, there's no reason for this. You know what I mean? Like, my dad has never did anything wrong. My dad's everything to me. He's never. Everything I learned was from my dad, and like, if he shouldn't deserve to get any hate.
Yeah. Oh man, that was hard to watch, listen to a second time, and I'm sure that you are having a hard time after hearing both those clips. It's terrifying. It's a deeply disturbing, maddening, really. And but we got to make sure that we don't look away from these people, these young people especially, and the situations that they're in. I thought this was an interesting news report from an NBC affiliate. I'm not sure where, but this is about an immigration lawyer, because if you can't get the clients, well, you might as well threaten and try to scare the lawyers out into defending them to begin with.
Really care who they're trying to deport or ask to leave the United States.
When Massachusetts resident Nicole Micciaroni received this email on Friday telling her to leave the country, she was baffled.
At first I thought it was for a client, but I looked really closely and the only name on the email was mine. It said that my parole status had been terminated and I should leave the country within 7 days.
But the 40-year-old is a U.S. citizen.
I think it's most likely a mistake, and they're just casting a really wide net. But it's a little concerning that these are going out to U.S. citizens.
Micciaroni is an immigration attorney working with many clients facing possible deportation issues, so her name and email are on a lot of paperwork. In a statement, a senior Department of Homeland Security official told us Customs and Border Protection is issuing notices terminating parole for individuals who do not have lawful status to remain. If a non-personal email, such as an American citizen contact, was provided by the alien, notices may have been sent to unintended recipients.
I think it's really scary that this is going on. It says that they're not being very careful. I think it's a scare tactic. I think they want people afraid of immigration.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Well, I thought I would share that with you. That was very important. Here's Jonathan Karl yesterday on ABC's This Week asking the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, incredulously how he feels about American troops on the streets of any American city. He's not at all disturbed by it. He thinks it's a great idea, by the way, Mike Johnson does, because he's awful.
That active duty, Secretary Hegseth said that active duty Marines there at Camp Pendleton, there by San Diego, are on high alert and could be mobilized. Could we really see active duty Marines on the streets of Los Angeles?
You know, one of our core principles is maintaining peace through strength. We do that on foreign affairs and domestic affairs as well. I don't think that's heavy-handed. I think that's an important signal.
You don't think sending the Marines into the streets of an American city is heavy-handed?
We have to be prepared to do what is necessary, and I think the notice that might happen might have the deterrent effect.
Okay, well, we'll see about that. That guy is the absolute worst. And speaking of terrible, here's Kristi Noem. She is the Secretary of Homeland Security. She also was on CBS. This is CBS Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan.
President Trump said masks will not be allowed to be worn at protests. Who's going to enforce that and how? And how can you justify it when law enforcement officials have their faces covered?
You know, what I would say is that the law is going to be enforced, and that what the laws are in this country is what we are doing, and our ICE officers and our law enforcement officers out there that are in these situations where people have questioned why they have their faces covered. It's for the safety of those individuals or the work that they're doing as far as protecting their identity so they can continue to do investigative work. So,
but are you tasking the National Guard soldiers with removing masks from protesters? I mean, are you trying to use them in that way?
National Guard soldiers are there to provide security for operations and to make sure that we have peaceful protests. So that's what their work is. And I won't get more specific on that just because we never do when it comes to law enforcement operations. We're doing the same standard procedures we always do and have for years in this country with our National Guard and with our, law enforcement folks that are on the ground working with these communities.
Not at all. They're not at all doing the same standard procedures. Everything is escalated, different, and legally questionable at best. So there you go, Kristi Noem on CBS. And now let's leave the issue of immigration and talk about the other big issue, the big, bad, beautiful bill and the big, bad breakup between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, the consequences of it, what it means. It's not just entertainment. It's bad. Here is Bernie Sanders talking about this. I think this is on CNN.
The issue, and I think the drama, the story of what happened last week is you are living increasingly in an oligarchic society. And Musk said to Trump, hey, listen, I spent $270 million to get you elected. I bought you the presidency because we have a corrupt campaign finance system and billionaires can do that. And Trump said, well, I gave you the right to run the government for 3 or 4 months, but I don't like the guy you want to run NASA, and we're going to get rid of him. And Musk got upset. This is a fight between oligarchs. It's a fight about power among the few, and it's really an embarrassment to those of us who believe in democracy and the rule of law.
All right, there's Bernie Sanders talking about it. Now here's Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway talking about a guy they know really well, Elon Musk, on their podcast. I think it's called Pivot or something, like 2 minutes of them.
Look, Donald Trump is going to prevail because he's the president, right? Ultimately.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think it's finished for him. I think it's finished because Elon is willing to go nuclear. He really is. He doesn't have a problem with what you just said, interestingly enough, that CEOs all want to say this to Trump, right? They want to stop being pushed around. If he's doing it, it will give permission to everybody else to start pushing back on Trump, I think.
Oh, I don't know, because I think every CEO looks at a 14% decline in the stock in one day and thinks, I don't control my board. I could get fired for this shit. I mean, Tesla shed $150 billion in value.
But I mean, the idea that you can, if Elon's doing it, like especially ones that are, look, Jamie Dimon's been critical. I think it'll give people permission to be more critical of Trump and start to chip away at his power, because I've always thought that he's in real trouble because of the trends in the polling and everything else. And by 2026, it's finished for him. But now this sort of, there's no telling what I warned the Trump people this, there's also no telling what he could do, right? You just don't know where he's going. He's got means, he's got motive, he's angry. He's, as you know, a petty person. He's got, as you discussed, a problem with some drugs. I think this guy could just go right off the rails and take Trump with him because he's so affiliated with Trump, if you think about it. And he's absolutely right. He helped, he was the critical part of getting Trump elected, I think.
Yeah, he may have in fact got him elected. But the thing is, and you've been more right than wrong on this. You predicted a while ago that this was going to be the mother of all breakups at some point, and it's happening. And now it seems obvious, but at the time people weren't predicting it, and you did predict it. But here's the thing. I think Trump has proven himself. We're in a slow burn towards an autocracy, and autocrats will sick their Department of Justice on people. And he's the president. And so if he wants to sick his DOJ on them, if he wants to fire up inspector generals to say, I have some real fears about his autonomous technology and we're auditing Tesla's tax returns. Oh, and by the way, we have evidence that he was carrying illicit drug. I mean, this guy isn't beyond.
No, but now everything will be tainted, right? It's just, it'll be so obvious to people what he's doing. And whether you like Elon or not, he still has a lot of fans too, right? Now, his numbers were declining because of his affiliation with Trump, right? His numbers were going down and his, he had just lost a lot of, because of the affiliation with Donald Trump. But if he's against Donald Trump, he'll get different fans, right? You could see it's almost, oddly enough, it is like a wrestling match, right? And this is how Trump conducts everything. We're in the middle of a wrestling match with one of those idiot narratives that they have there, which is they're throwing blows, they're causing entertainment. But in this case, I think Elon can truly do a lot of damage to this man, and especially those who were so effusive about him, like Mike Johnson and others, right? He can pick them off one at a time, and Trump has to protect, right, in some ways. Trump can't go nuclear on him in a similar way. Maybe he can.
I think this is such a tough one to call. And I think if our biases are coming out here, I think what we're discovering is you hate Trump more than Musk, and I hate Musk more than Trump.
No. I just think he's unexpected, right? And so he's a wild card. I think he's, listen, I would do an interview with him in 5 seconds to talk about this. But I think that Trump is somewhat reliably corrupt the way he is. Trump, you never know what Elon's going to do. You just don't.
All right, there you go. Thought that was interesting. Wanted to share it with you. Now, Scott Pelley was on CNN talking to Anderson Cooper. Of course, Scott Pelley is the former anchor of CBS News and also of the very famous and respected show 60 Minutes. Well, so is Anderson Cooper. He's on 60 Minutes because he has like 8 jobs and $8 billion. But anyway, they're friends because they work together, of course, at CBS. So Scott Pelley went over to CNN to talk about CBS, which I thought was interesting. The whole interview is worth watching, but here's just a brief snippet of it for the clip show.
About doing it, obviously, this is a very fraught time for the company you work for, that I work for as well, for CBS News. There's a lawsuit by the president based on unfounded allegations. It's very likely very possible the parent company will choose to settle this lawsuit. Were you nervous about doing it, and were you worried it might impact your ability or the way people perceived you as a journalist?
I was not nervous about doing it. I felt very strongly that this was something that needed to be said. It did not strike me that it would impact people's thought of me as a journalist, because part of that speech is a speech about freedom of speech. That should be non-controversial.
You're not actually mentioning the president by name in this. You don't refer to him by name.
I don't refer to him or the president or the White House or the administration. But I was talking about actions that have been taken by the government over these last many months. But there was a little bit of hysteria among some about this speech, and I simply ask you, what does it say about our country when there's hysteria about a speech that's about freedom of speech?
Has anything surprised you that you have been reporting on about this administration?
What has surprised me the most, Anderson, and I'm sure that this is something that you're running into, is how pervasive the fear is that when we at 60 Minutes call people and say, hey, will you do an interview with us? They're telling us no.
It's harder and harder to get people to talk about the administration on camera.
They do not want to be on camera. They do not want to stick their head up over the foxhole. And that is part of what the Wake Forest speech was all about, that we must not be in fear. This is exactly what Ed Murrow was saying in that editorial at the end of the McCarthy broadcast. We must not walk in fear of one another. We are not descended from fearful people.
Joseph McCarthy, Senator, his henchman Roy Cohn, they instilled fear in a lot of people. I mean, they terrorized people.
Absolutely, they did. And they were not solely responsible for the Red Scare. McCarthy lent his name to the Red Scare, but it existed before he came along. He just capitalized on it. And because it existed, there was fear throughout the country that it could be personally destructive, that you could lose your job, you could lose your company. And I believe that we may be moving in a similar direction in the country today. People are silencing themselves for fear that the government will retaliate against them. And that's not the America that we all love.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well done, Scott Pelley. Now here is Jessica Yellen talking to Congressman Jamie Raskin. I forgot to include this in the immigration section.
What's going on with ICE right now, that so many of these, we think they're ICE officers, are wearing masks and they are not showing papers sometimes.
I want to know from the Trump administration, by what authority are their officers going out there and saying that they don't need to have a warrant in order to enter people's homes and offices? Now, this just happened to my colleague, Jerry Nadler from New York. handcuffed and arrested a 26-year-old legislative aide who was absolutely frantic and hysterical, crying. Obviously, it's meant to intimidate and terrify members of Congress and their staff. Another staffer who was in there, she's saying, well, where's your warrant? And the guy says, I don't need a warrant. I'm a federal officer. That's the whole reason we need to see your warrant, because you're asserting that you're a federal officer. You're claiming to be a federal officer, but by what warrant do you come enter? That's what the Constitution says in the Fourth Amendment. You need a warrant based on probable cause. On this one, Congressman Adler and I just wrote a letter demanding a hearing here in the Judiciary Committee, and I'm the ranking member of Judiciary. If they don't do it, we're going to have our own hearing. But this is why the courts are so important and why we are acting with as much vigor and power as we've got to defend the independence of the courts, because the courts understand almost without exception, whether an appointee of a Republican or a Democratic president, that this is a moment of high danger for the rule of law in America.
Oh, there you go. Jamie Raskin talking about the issue. Now, Cory Booker on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday.
I do have to start with President Trump saying he plans to deploy the National Guard to Los Angeles to deal with the protesters there. The president bypassing the governor and federalizing the Guard himself. He says he did so because Governor Gavin Newsom and L.A. Mayor Karen Bass refused to act against the unrest. What is your response to President Trump's decision to deploy the National Guard?
Look, since years before I was born, law enforcement knows it's good when there's cooperation and coordination. For the president to do this when it wasn't requested, breaking with generations of tradition, is only going to incite the situation and make things worse. We are now at a point where we have a president who sat back and did nothing as people stormed our Capitol, viciously beat police. And then when those people who viciously beat police and led to some of their deaths, therefore cop killers, were convicted by juries, he then pardoned them all. So for him to be talking to anybody right now about responsive law enforcement to protect people is hypocritical at best. The reality is we see peaceful protests launching in Los Angeles. And again, any violence against police officers should not be accepted. Local authorities can handle that. But remember, a lot of these peaceful protests are being generated because the president of the United States is sowing chaos and confusion by arresting people who are showing up for their immigration hearings, who are trying to abide by the law. He's arresting them. And you see this in communities that are Republican, Trump supporters, being outraged that he's raiding kitchens and arresting people, high schools and arresting people who are not what he said he would do, which is focus law enforcement resources on violent criminals and people that are a danger to other Americans.
Yeah, okay. Well done, Senator Booker. And now let's go to our friend John Fugelsang. He was on CNN sitting across from Scott Jennings, rather. He said this. I thought this was really great. Fugelsang, always awesome. Here's a quick clip.
And they're trying to punish the entire on the trans athlete, which we discussed right here last week. This is a high school athlete, and they're trying to punish the entire state over that one student.
Flood aid, yeah, let's hurt as many as we can. You ever notice nobody hates other Americans more than the Americans who keep boasting about how American they are? California gives our country $80 billion more than it takes back. Is this Donald Trump's way of saying he'd like to see California keep that money and not send it to red states where it can be good welfare cash for everybody else? This is not even legal. Congress owns the purse strings. He can't even do it. It's all a complete distraction. I swear, the only thing this administration hates more than the New Testament is the Constitution.
Yeah, it's the Constitution. Well done. All right, let's go back to ABC's Jonathan Karl, who again had the idiot Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, on to lie about debt and deficit.
Okay, let me ask you finally about this question of the debt ceiling. This bill adds another $4 trillion to the debt ceiling. Donald Trump came out this week, I'm sure you saw, again, it's not the first time he said this, to just eliminate the debt ceiling. Agreeing with Elizabeth Warren on this question. What do you think of that?
Well, he regards this as an arbitrary kind of thing that puts pressure on Congress and the White House. It comes up every few years where we have to extend the debt ceiling. What's really important about President Trump and his difference in this with Elizabeth Warren and everybody else is he has no intention whatsoever of spending higher levels of money. In fact, we're in the process of cutting. The one big
this is adding a lot to the debt, to the national debt.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
I mean, it is.
No, it's not. The CBO is arguing that if we extend and make permanent existing tax cuts, that's going to add to the deficit. What we're doing in this bill is cutting $1.6 trillion of spending. It is government spending that creates the deficits. We're going to reduce the deficit with it.
Debt's going to be higher at the end of this, even if this
not with our pro-growth policies. We can argue that on another day.
All right.
All right, there it is. There's the lie. Well, here's Senator Rand Paul telling a little bit more of a truth.
But the American people need to know that $500 billion is 3 months worth of borrowing. This is literally out of control. And then I'd come back in 3 months, and that'll be about the time that the government spending will end. We'll have the song and dance about a shutdown of government. There'll be another big omnibus, and I will say, once again, I'm not giving you $1 trillion. I'm not giving you $5 trillion. I'll give it 3 more months, but you have to behave. You have to restrain spending. And they're not doing it. And if they're asking to borrow $5 trillion, that is the example. $5 trillion in borrowing means they are not restraining spending. That's the ultimate summation of all these numbers is what will the deficit be next year. If it's going to be over $2 trillion next year, none of this is meaningful.
All right, here is Sam Harris talking about Elon Musk and Donald Trump. I thought this was really interesting, and he's pretty articulate and eloquent in this clip. Here it is.
I really do think Trump and his effect on our society has been evil. It has damaged us in all kinds of ways that it'll take a generation to account for. And the fact that we had the richest people in our society, all of whom, literally all of whom, know Trump to have been a fake businessman propped up as a reality TV game show host, and just this confection brought to our society by Mark Burnett, advertised to half the country as a business genius when he was anything but. All these oligarchs knew that and pretended to respect him when it became convenient to do so. And now he has grifted himself into, real wealth. And his second term is this ravenous predation on, every opportunity to enrich himself and his family. And all of these oligarchs have at best looked the other way, and at worst, in Elon's case, collaborated. We resemble a banana republic in ways that one could have scarcely imagined, even in Trump's first term. And a lot of the responsibility for that rests with Elon. So I just think I'm trying to contain my Schadenfreude here because it's easily available. But this whole thing it's going to be entertaining, but it really is. It's also embarrassing, right? It's also mortifying. It's like this is just not good for our society. It's not good for our country. And just imagine how we look to our allies and our enemies on the world stage. All of this is bad, even though it's some of it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, well said by Sam Harris. Also on ABC's This Week, Martha Raddatz had Volodymyr Zelensky on and asked him this and then translated it.
President Trump told our Terry Moran in an interview, a recent interview, that he does believe Putin wants peace. You think he's wrong?
With all due respect to President Trump, Zelensky says, I think it's just his personal opinion. Trust me, we understand the Russians much better, the mentality of the Russians, than the Americans understand the Russians. I know for sure Putin doesn't want to stop the war.
All right, there you go. That is it for the serious clips. Now let's get to some comedy. I like to end on some jokes, some laughs before I get to the interview. And let's go to Jimmy Kimmel Live, where on Friday night he was talking about how stupid so many people were in the administration, how ridiculous it all is. And he was sharing this Fox News clip where a woman on the panel was having to answer for Trump's crazy tweet last week that Joe Biden, he retweeted that Joe Biden was dead and he was actually being operated by a droid or some crazy shit. That's what you hear her starting to talk or finishing to talk, and then Jimmy Kimmel comes in. So here it is.
I know Trump's sense of humor. I'm sure he was just trolling him. What do you think?
Well, I would hope so. But I think also it gets to the real heart of the scandal, which is
who in the world was president for the past 4 years if it wasn't Joe Biden? Was it a clone? Was it a cable of White House officials?
Yes, was it a cable of White House officials, or even scarier, a cabal of them? That reminds me, I need to cancel my subscription to Cabal. But don't let her mispronunciation distract you from the point she was making, which was every bit as dumb as the word she got wrong. Then we have our Secretary of Education, Ms. Linda McMahon, who appeared before the Senate Appropriations Committee, where Markwayne Mullin made a strong case for improving education in his home state of Oklahoma.
And what was we ranked in reading and math in 1979?
I'm sorry, what?
What was we ranked nationally in math and reading in 1979?
You heard it, me. What was we ranked? Was we reading good or reading bad? That's what happens when you get homeschooled by your dog. Luckily for Mark Wayne, he wasn't the only dummy at the hearing. He had some serious competition from Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana.
We spend $1.858 billion a year on TRIO?
Yes.
More than 10 years?
Yes.
So that's over $1 trillion we've spent on this program.
Madam Secretary, and I'm not a great mathematician, but I think you were talking about $1 trillion. I believe 1.5 billion times 10 is $15 billion. That's a little bit off from $1 trillion. So,
I think the budget cuts $1.2 billion. For TRIO.
Well, 1.2, that would be $12 billion, not $1 trillion.
Okay.
Okay, all right. Now we finally found a dumber Kennedy than RFK. These are the people. These are the people responsible for passing our budget. They can't do simple math. And to top it off, we have a new character throwing his dunce cap in the ring. The acting head of FEMA, the guy in charge of the department is supposed to help us after a natural disaster, told his staff yesterday he wasn't aware the United States had a hurricane season, which obviously had some of his staff concerned. Then a spokesperson tried to spin it by telling the press he was joking. This is the guy. His name is David Richardson. You tell me, does this look like a guy who was joking? There's not a funny bone in this body. He looks like Vigo the Carpathian's mean older brother silently watching you drown. Is there anyone in this administration who knows how to do their job? You know, there used to be a political party in the United States called the Know-Nothings. They didn't call themselves that. They called themselves the American Party, which they wanted to make America great again by kicking out the immigrants, who back then were the Germans and the Irish, like these two, seen here stealing an election. Does this sound familiar to anybody? The Know-Nothings argued that Germany and Ireland weren't sending their best people. They were sending unskilled, wretched refuse like this guy, Frederick Trump, and this kid, Patrick Kennedy. And they had to go, but they didn't go. And now their ancestors are the new Know-Nothings, including our head of Homeland Security, Christie, I don't know what habeas corpus means, gnome, and our Secretary of Education doesn't know the difference between AI and A1, and Pete, I don't know who's on my Signal thread or that I shouldn't be using Signal Hegseth, and now, David, I didn't know there was a hurricane season Richardson.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, good stuff from Kimmel, and that is the clip show. Those are the headlines. That is the news. It takes a lot of work to put it together each and every day. I cannot do it without your paid subscription. So thank you very much for those of you who support me with a paid subscription. Those of you who have upgraded your subscription lately, I appreciate that. It means a lot. You go from $5 to $10 or $10 to $15 a month, whatever is worth it to you. It makes a huge, huge difference because it's all I'm doing, really. And I love doing it. But I can't do it without you. So hope to see you tonight at our hangout. If you're a paid subscriber, you'll get an invitation to that. We always have a lot of fun there. But now it's time to get to the guest, and he is a good one. He is a great one. He is a regular guest back in the day over at the SiriusXM show. He's the best-selling author of two widely acclaimed books, The Swamp and The New Deal. He's a former staff writer for the Washington Post, for Time Magazine, as well as Politico. He's won all kinds of journalism awards, including the George Polk Award for national reporting and more. He is a real cool guy, and I always love talking to him. He researches his work for years before he puts these books out. The new book is We Are Eating the Earth, The Race to Fix Our Food System and Save Our Climate. I'll talk with Mike Grunwald again when the book comes out. You can pre-order it right now if you want. The book comes out for sale on July 1st everywhere. And this is a very important conversation to be having. And it's not being had because we are so focused on so many distractions. So I'm real glad that Mike's written this book and that he joined me. Let's do it right now with Michael Grunwald. There he is. New book. Wow. Look at it. It's in my hands. Congratulations, my friend. It's been way too long, and I'm so excited to read this book.
Pete, I'm so grateful for you having me on. And I have to say, I mean, if I can put in a plug for the host here, I haven't written a book since 12 years ago, and you were really like the number one booster of the New Deal. And you were so kind and so generous in having me on and telling saying nice things about it, but not in just like oh, this is great. Like you had really read it. And I'm kind of a dork. I'm a nerd. I write about these kind of obscure things. But I will always be grateful for the way you really flacked it to the world. So
that's very kind of you, and I've always admired your journalism, and it's a mutual love session here because I think that book particularly was and is a very important book. And look at how government can work, how it does work, and what it does, and what it means. And we just don't have enough of that. There's never going to be enough television segments. There's never going to be enough journalism and magazines, and which is your old beat, and newspapers. There's just never going to be enough of that type of coverage, which is why it's so easy to demonize government and faceless, nameless bureaucrats. And we're all about to find out how important government is in our lives, I fear. I mean, you probably have a good take on what the cuts that have been made and might be made could mean to our lives.
Sure. I mean, look, government it's I remember when early in my career writing about sort of FEMA stuff and going to, the deep red states and writing about how essentially like everybody hates government until the floodwaters start to rise. Right. And this is that writ large, there are all kinds of problems with foreign aid. But as you and your listeners know, it's a tiny part of the budget, and the parts of it that are good are really, really good and save a lot of lives. There's a little bit of waste in government, but, not that much. I see more waste when I write about corporations, and, most of what government does is, give money to people who need it and defend the country and try to provide some health care and pensions for people in old age. And, it's really easy to demonize it and find research grants that sound funny. In my world now, I saw that Trump was posting about how, oh my God, they're doing research into legumes. Well, legumes are soybeans. Legumes are alfalfa. Legumes are pangamia, which is a sort of super tree that I've written about that can help save the world. And they're incredibly important to, the national economy, to fighting hunger, to fighting climate change. And it's just, just because leguminous is kind of a funny word, doesn't make it a funny investment.
Very healthy for you as well, is my understanding. I'm not a legumist. I'm not into legumes myself, so I'm not. But I'm told I should be. I'm told that they should be a part of my my diet. So, but
I'm trying. I cut out beef when I started working on this book, because, sort of beef is really the worst thing you can eat for the climate. And everybody told me, especially since I still eat chicken and pork, which are not phenomenal, but beef is 10 times worse. And everybody told me, oh, you won't miss it at all. And that was total bullshit. I still crave beef all the time. It's delicious. I'm learning to love lentils, but they're not beef.
I've got so many questions for you about your new book, which I haven't read yet. I just got it. We're going to do another full interview when I dig into it, like I have all of the rest of your work, closer to the actual release date, which is July 1, I believe. You can pre-order We Are Eating the Earth right now. And then by the time I talk to Michael again, we'll do a whole live event. So those who have bought and read the book can join us and ask questions if I so deem it.
That'd be amazing.
So, but tell people a little bit about how you arrived at food and ag because I believe you got into that through climate and energy.
Right. No, I mean, and you remember in the New Deal, I had a lot about, the sort of the beginnings of the clean energy revolution, a lot about energy and climate. I used to write an energy column for Time Magazine back in the day. Yeah. And I've been writing about this stuff, not full time. I was kind of a general policy journalist, but I wrote a lot about climate. And, the long story short is I realized food is basically a third of the climate problem, but it's 3% of climate finance, and it's like 1% of climate conversation. And I realized that I was spectacularly ignorant about it. I didn't know if meat was bad for the environment. I had to call and ask a source. And I figured pretty much, there are thousands of books about energy and climate. And if I don't know that food is such a big climate issue, then probably most people don't. And the main thing that I learned is that agriculture is eating the earth, right? It's 2 of every 5 acres on the planet. I try to tell people that like cities and suburbs that we're always worried about sprawl, that's like 1% of the land on earth. But agriculture is 40%. So when you take a cross-country flight, you look out the window, all those squares and circles, like we all know it, like this is like the world is becoming a farm. That all used to be wetlands and forests and grasslands. And the transformation of nature into agriculture is essentially, it's a huge part of the climate story and all of our other environmental stories.
The transformation of nature into agriculture is a phrase you use a lot. Can you explain what those 2 terms mean? You mean like a forest becomes a field, a wetland becomes a field, stuff like that?
Yeah, and it's in many ways the world is becoming an animal farm.
Well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with I take down a forest, but I grow a cornfield?
All right. Well, the first thing that's wrong with it, I describe it as like if you're trying to decarbonize the planet while deforesting the earth, it's like trying to clean your house while smashing your vacuum cleaner to bits in the living room. Because first of all, you're losing when you deforest, you're losing all that carbon in the forest, and you're sending that up into the sky. And so you're making a huge mess. But forests are also our best tool for reducing climate change because they soak up the carbon that we pump into the atmosphere with our fossil fuels. So it's this kind of double whammy where really, right now we're losing a soccer field worth of tropical forest every 6 seconds. And that just needs to stop. Somehow we're going to need to produce 50% more food by 2050, and we can't use any more land. And so that's really what my story is about. It's about how can we, feed the world without frying it? How can we get, there are going to be almost 10 billion people on Earth in 25 years, and they need to eat, and we're going to have to feed them. And so far, agriculture is pretty much the only way we know how to do it, but it just can't use any more land, and it's got to reduce its emissions like 75, 80%.
I feel like it's really hard to categorize you as a journalist in terms of the way that you approach these issues. I feel like you really don't have a bias going in. You use your sources and you ask questions, and then you try to find someone to debunk that or contradict that. But you also have a good understanding enough as a journalist to understand science and the credible scientists, credible researchers, and organizations, which means you could look at an organization that you like and might support in general who's put out a study, and you could be critical of it even though you generally like what they do or what their charter is because, the science isn't there and so on. When you approach this book, who were you talking to and what did you learned so much, I know, and reporting out this book. So what was your approach for it?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, I always try to have an open mind, but in this point, in this topic, I had an empty mind. I really didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So, people particularly, and I'm sure we'll discuss this, but, because I'm not or at least I recognize the importance of high yield agriculture, which in this country and in much of the world right now is often industrial agriculture. So a lot of people are kind of angry about what I found, but it's certainly like as I came came into this saying like, oh, I want to be an apologist for these big ag guys who treat animals badly and treat people badly and have horrible politics and,
right.
And they're, probably going to create the next pandemic. I really went into this, thinking like, God, this is a huge deal. Agriculture is covering 40% of the earth. It's the leading source of water pollution, water shortages, biodiversity losses. It's like the main driver behind this, mass extinction that people are talking about. It's like, I just got to figure out, what is this problem and how can we fix it? And like you said, I talked to a couple thousand people while I was working on this, so really on every side of the issue. And, and I learned stuff. And, sometimes, some of the things that people who, I'm a huge admirer of Michael Pollan. He writes beautifully. It's like, but some of the stuff he writes about is wrong. It's like he has this kind of nostalgia for old style farming, as if it was like kind of wonderful for the environment. But in fact, like the transformation of these bucolic, rustic, pastoral, diverse, kinder and gentler farms into, high yield, more intensive farms, which does have some environmental impact, but it turns out to be not nearly as much of an impact as the transformation of nature into the lovely Michael Pollan farms. And you sort of document that over and over again. And you see these movies like Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, that talk about how, we just need to farm differently, and all that carbon that's up in the sky will be sort of magically repatriated into the soil. And it turns out that's just not true, right? That you can't measure it. It turns out that if you do measure it down a meter down, you're barely sequestering any carbon. That if you do sequester a little carbon, it's impossible to make sure you can keep it there. And most of all, that you can't really add a lot more carbon without adding a lot more nitrogen, which creates all kinds of other climate problems. So again, it wasn't like I came in there saying like, I want to prove that Jason Momoa and, Rosario Dawson don't know what the hell they're talking about, or, and at the same time, Al Gore is big on this stuff. And on the other side, Joe Rogan and Bobby Kennedy and, King Charles. And, everybody loves this idea that we can save ourselves through, basically carbon farming. But the science just isn't there. And so I don't think I'm like a lot of the stuff I'm doing. It's not like I'm some kind of scientist or like deep thinker. Most of it is just sort of like slightly complicated stuff that I try to make, a little more accessible and easier for, kind of make the medicine go down a little easy.
Yeah, that's why I've always
It's not like rocket science.
That's why I've always liked your style and your journalism, and I'm really excited about this new book. You mentioned those celebrities and those documentaries because celebrities help hawk and are in those documentaries. They think they're doing something good. They believe in the cause. But I mean, that's so many of these documentaries and books and articles. Obviously, you just never know, especially when you want it to be the answer. I mean, you can think back to like a documentary about covering the roads and solar panels. I was like, that's awesome. When is that? That sounds great. Or any of these other alternative forms of, especially biofuels, all those types of, a lot of them have these conspiracies baked in. The only reason this can't take off is because the oil industry, this or that. And you're biased to believe that shit, right. And there's a grain of truth to a lot of these things. But in this case, for your new book, We Are Eating the Earth, The Race to Fix Our Food System and Save Our Climate, which is available for pre-order wherever you buy books, is who did you talk to? You talked to a lot of farmers. You talked to all kinds of agricultural experts and scientists. Give me like a lightning round, a list of the types of sources you talked to get.
Oh, God. I mean, scientists, agronomists, life cycle analysis guys, because it really seems that it turns out that the guys who do climate analysis, starting with biofuels, but then with all kinds of agriculture, were just doing it wrong. They were ignoring the importance of land, and it turns out land's a really big deal. So I was talking to environmentalists, but also, talking to agribusinesses. You do kind of triangulate, right? And once, where you can get people to agree on the facts, even if they're fighting over the issues. The problem, as you said, it's like most books, like they always tell you, the publishers tell you, you need to have a tribe, right, to sell a book. And there are like 200 books about how like regenerative agriculture is going to save the earth. But, those people are they're going to find plenty that they won't like in my book. And then there are the kind of vegan books about how meat is murder. And look, I love I have a couple chapters about fake meat. I really wish it well. I hope it takes off. I hope it gets to taste better and be cheaper. But there's a lot that the vegans aren't going to like in my book. The farmers, I try to make the point that only 1% of us farm, and the rest of us are dependent on those people. So we really do owe them a great debt. But I also point out that every farm is a kind of environmental crime scene. It's this sort of echo of the nature that it replaced. And of course, farmers don't like to hear that. They talk about what great stewards they are of their land. And I'm like, yes, you might be, but collectively agriculture is stewarding a mess. So really, I think my tribe is going to be like Pete Dominic and just people who are interested in kind of learning about this stuff, because most of us don't know much about it, and I didn't. And hopefully we'll be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And this is, eating is something that we all do 2 or 3 times a day. So it's something that we have an interest in, and climate is important. The planet, this is a nice one. It's got like pizza and reliable Wi-Fi and breathable air. Hopefully people will be like, oh, I'm kind of curious about this and I don't know shit. So
this is
that's going to be my tribe.
Yeah, I don't know what our tribe is. I don't know what it is. I'm not like a contrarian or certainly not an egoist. I always consider myself kind of an imposter in almost every room I'm in terms of like talking to smart people that I interview every day. And I don't want to say like I'm a critical thinker. I think I'm like just curious. I think we're curious.
You're curious.
I think journalists are curious and ask questions. I often say I'm a journalist and then I code switch out of it. I've never reported out, an issue, but I'm constantly asking smart journalists, experts, scholars questions. And I'm just asking people like privately questions. I was asking a flight attendant her experience, about in the airline industry over the past few years and so on. And I could have written a report about that. Just curious. And that's who you are in this book. You have so many different sources. But lay it out for me, because I want to just say, like, what's the problem? And let me try it. The problem is we have billions of people that need to eat, and we also have an issue with greenhouse gases being emitted in the atmosphere. So we have all those people that eat, produce all those greenhouse gases in all the different ways just in our existence. And so climate change and feeding people. And the first thing people usually say is, we don't have a food shortage. We have a distribution problem. Take that on.
Sure. I mean, and this is, there are going to be a lot of like whatabouts with this book. It's sort of like, well, why can't we just, if we all stopped eating beef, like, wouldn't that fix the problem? And the answer is like, yeah, a lot of it. And it's just as true. Well, what if we stopped wasting a quarter of our food, and with it, a quarter of the farmland that we use to grow the food, and water and fertilizer? And it's like, yes, that is true. That would help a lot if we stopped doing that. And yet I happen to notice that we haven't.
Any American legislator that supported any kind of even beef moderation would have his head chopped off in public.
Right, exactly. I talk about in the book, I did interview a pollster who told me that taxes on meat, or really any restrictions on meat, were the least popular public policy he had ever surveyed. He said it was up there with veterans benefits for ISIS. So this is going to be hard. But what I do say is that, like, the math sucks. And so even if we did, in the rich world, cut our ruminant meat consumption, that's beef and lamb, in half, and we can even eat more chicken. But even if we did that, even if the entire world cut its food waste in half, and then even if I write a lot about the way biofuels are a huge waste of land, say we just stopped using them, well, the world would still need to make a lot more food with a lot less land. We would have to increase our yields even faster over the next 25 years than we have since the beginning of the Green Revolution 60 years ago. And that's pretty fast. So we're going to have to do all the things. So yes, I would like to see, better distribution. And it's like and look, my solutions aren't going to do a lot for people who are starving in sub-Saharan Africa or starving in Gaza for that matter. But the fact is, lower yield agriculture isn't going to help them either. And I think a lot of the people who say we don't need more food, we just need to distribute it better. That's usually a reason to, that they're explaining why we don't need, we can start with agricultural reforms that are going to produce even less food. And my feeling is no, we can't do that because that's going to mean even more hunger. But what it's really going to mean is even more deforestation. Because I say my book is about how to feed the world without frying the world. But honestly, we kind of know how to feed the world. You can just cut down more trees and grow more food. We're really good at that. People thought we were going to have endless famines because the population was going to outstrip the food supply. And that didn't happen because, we're really good. We invented cool fertilizers and pesticides and, genetically modified seeds and large-scale irrigation, and we did a lot of cool stuff. And now, hopefully, in the future, we'll do a lot of cool stuff that has less of an environmental impact. But the fact is, we're good at making food when there's demand for the food. What we're not necessarily good at is making more food without cutting down more trees and draining more swamps. And that's what we have to get good at.
Tackle the question about capitalism and agriculture. I mean, I'm going to grow the crops that people want, and I don't care what it means for the earth. I care about how much money I'm making and how much I'm investing. So I'm growing fields worth of corn because you could sell that. And then the other thing is government incentives and lobbying. So it's there's so many potatoes for McDonald's. I mean, I've read all those books and interviewed all those authors and then forgotten everything I read, of course. But the issue of capitalism and the issue of special interests lobbying for this crop at this price, and then, of course, the subsidies, crop insurance, and all the rest, it feels like it's so much more complex than the binary of feeding people and not burning the earth.
Well, it's funny. In some ways, I think it's maybe less complex.
Right.
I think everything you say about ag subsidies is true. And a lot of it's almost background noise for the book. The idea that the ag industry in the United States and pretty much every country gets basically what it wants. The world spends $600 billion a year subsidizing agriculture. And $300 billion of that is just direct handouts to farmers with pretty much no strings attached. And so part of what I'm saying is hey, if we're going to do that, can we just please attach some strings? So we'll say hey, it's great that you're making lots of food. We'd like to help you make even more, but you have to do it while making less of a mess. And I really think that's part of the problem. Now the question of actually the stuff they grow, most of, people love to hate on soybeans, ew, soy, it's deforesting the Amazon. Well, the fact is,
that it feminizes men too, doesn't it?
Sorry? Yeah, that's right. Right. It's going to give man boobs. Soy is fine. And it's a very efficient crop. And the reason farmers grow it is because you can grow more calories and starch and even a low protein for some of these crops, with less land and fewer inputs and higher yields. And if, you see these boycotts and we're going to have a soy moratorium, well, usually it's going to be replaced with a crop that does similar stuff, but not, but you need more acres to grow it.
Who would be behind a boycott who's against soy?
A lot of environmentalists are pushing for boycotts of soy. And some of it is really, particularly it's let's boycott soy that comes from deforested land. And I think that's a good incentive in terms of trying to stop deforestation. But the fact is, pretty much all of our crops come from either deforested or certainly de-wilded land, right? And in the United States, it's easy for us to point our fingers at Brazil or Indonesia and say oh, it's terrible. You're tearing down the Amazon. You're tearing down the rainforest. Yeah, well, that's because we did that in the 19th century. Indiana was 85% forest. And now, of course, it's all corn and soybeans. And we look at our corn and soybeans guys and say like, oh, what they're doing is good. But what they're doing in Brazil is bad because, 5 or 10 years ago, they tore down the forest. But they're doing the same thing, right? And they're all using land. And what I'm trying to kind of bang my spoon on my high chair about is the opportunity cost of land. That like when you use land to grow food, that's land that can no longer grow trees. It can no longer be a forest. It can no longer store all that carbon. When we use land to grow biofuels, that can't grow food or store carbon. So that's a total disaster. But this idea that kind of every acre is sacred and that we need to think of this land, that it needs to be used efficiently so that, the more food we can produce per acre, the fewer acres we need to produce food. That's not a comfortable thing for a lot of people to think about because we like the idea of these kind of glorified gardens and these sort of twee organic farms. And when they can do it with high yields, I'm all for it. But the idea like it's okay that we're going to not make that much food because, it's going to go farm to table and the whole world is going to eat, $300 a plate, organic meals, like that is not going to feed the world. And that is a kind of first world luxury.
Very well said. Very well said. I can't wait till I'm done with the book and I can ask you, I'm going to look up all these criticisms and critical questions of conclusion that you arrive at because, I am a sucker for environmentalism and a charismatic environmentalist is going to get me every time. I want to be one. I aspire to be one, but I am more interested in trying to get things right and trying to be more realistic and pragmatic because I really don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good on this or any other issue. And I think that's how the world works. And I think that's how we are. I mean, I know what I would like, but I can't have it. And what I would like is fresh strawberries and raspberries every day delivered to me by a renewable energy powered drone built by a union member, human being. And none of that's happening. None of those things are.
Well, look, I did an event in Berkeley with like 200 foodies and hippies in the audience. Alice Waters was sitting in the third row glaring at me because I wasn't telling the story she wanted to hear.
He is the one of the leaders of the slow cooking movement. Is that what
slow food movement? She's the chef Denise, the sort of famous chef, and she's done a lot of good work, and she believes in what she believes, and more power to her. But it was funny, like towards the end, and I was kind of making these sort of math cases, these rational cases for why we need to make more food with less land to save the Amazon. And it was actually a New York Times reporter was the moderator. And she said, look, Mike, I think, this has been interesting. You've opened a lot of our eyes. You've made this very logical and rational and mathematical argument, but aren't these really moral issues? And I was like, yeah, this is super moral. Like, the climate change is a moral issue. What I said to her was like, and the people who are going to suffer, if we deforest the Amazon are not going to be like, fancy white people in Berkeley. It's going to be indigenous people living in the Amazon, or it's going to be people living in the floodplains of Bangladesh. And, and the problems with biodiversity are not, those are problems that are moral problems. Like I do care about the planet and I do care about the wild species that live on it. Right now livestock outweighs the wild species 30-1. So I don't think of myself as
livestock outwit it. What is the wild species?
Like wild mammals, like all those wild animals the bugs and bunnies and, jaguars and macaws, everything out there, but the 70 billion, farm animals on Earth are, those are the species that are right now dominating the Earth. It's us and them. And, it's us and the animals we eat. So I'm trying to make a case like, hey, this isn't just me saying like we can't have nice things. This is me saying like, hey, we should have nice things, and these are some of the things we're going to have to do.
I think of myself as a lobbyist and an advocate for everything non-human.
Sorry, I missed it. For everything what?
Morally, I try to think of myself as an advocate for everything non-human. And then, of course, I eat it all and kill. I committed a genocide on a bunch of ants last week over and over that we're getting in the house. But, they don't have a voice, and all the plants and critters don't have a voice. And environmentalists have fashioned themselves as the voice for everything but humans. And clearly humans are the primary problem, because not only, the issue around agriculture and all those cattle is methane, right? And the only reason they're all in existence is because we demand that they be, because we love eating them.
Even more, and the methane is a real problem, and it, bothers me when, the climate deniers sort of make fun of the burping and farting cows, because it's a real issue. But the real problem with cattle is how much land they use. Like, they are extraordinarily inefficient converters of their feed into our food. It takes 25 calories to feed to a cow to get 1 calorie of beef. And so that's what's eating the earth, right? And so, but you are absolutely right. And by cutting out beef and eating more chicken, like, actually cows are probably treated better than chickens. And so there I'm contributing to a different problem. So these things are hard, and they are trade-offs. And I think we talked about with the New Deal that, it was a book about change. And really the takeaway was that kind of better is better than worse. Like you said, perfect isn't always on the menu. And that's how I feel with this stuff too. I'm not getting on my high horse and saying, like, don't eat meat or even don't eat beef. I do think people should try to do a little better, eat a little less beef, waste a little less food. But I have solar panels on my roof. I drive an electric car, but I still fly too much. I have an impact. We all have an impact. I think we need better policies. We need corporations to do better. And then also we should try to, have better behaviors. And, I don't expect anybody to be perfect, but I think it would be great if everybody could try to be a little better.
Well, that's never going to happen in America and most countries unless you legislate it. We couldn't even wear masks, for your fucking sick old.
Well, I will say it is. Look, I don't have a lot of confidence in like people coming together, and like, our species is not really great at being nice to each other. We're not really great at sacrificing for the common good when we don't think we're going to die tomorrow, but we are really good at inventing stuff, right? And so far we haven't invented, meat alternatives that taste better than meat and cost less. But, with government investment, we invented stuff that works better than coal. And we just started working on these food and climate problems. When 15 years ago, when I started thinking about energy and climate, we were nowhere. Like, there really were no alternatives to fossil fuels. The only ones were really biofuels like corn ethanol, which turns out to be even worse than gasoline. And you look how far we've come in 15 years. We've had really radical change. And so I do want another one of these messages is that radical change always seems unfathomable before it happens. And right now, like, I feel like these food and climate issues, people aren't even grappling with them. My book is at least an effort to grapple. And I think, I think if we grapple, I have some confidence that we'll start doing better. It's like not a Debbie Downer book, but right now we're not doing shit. Like, the problem's just getting worse. Yeah. And I write about all these promising solutions, but none of them have traction yet. And so my hope is that, like, when I finish my next book in 15 years and you say, like, hey, how'd we do on that food and climate stuff? I'll be like, actually better than we expected.
Remember the old days when we did grapple with real issues, but just everything. And now we're too busy manufacturing nonsense and getting outraged over things that aren't happening to grapple with the issues that are happening. All right. Well, I will let you go. And when I am done with the book, we're going to do a whole thing. I hope you wet people's whistle with this conversation. We Are Eating the Earth is available for pre-order now, and I will be promoting the hell out of it for you. And, well, not for you, for the world, for the planet.
Well, I really appreciate it. And like I said, people who listen to your show and just sort of want to learn a little bit about the world, that's who I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
Because I'm so grateful for everything you do.
I've always thought this is a classroom, and I'm just a member of it. I'm just a wise ass in the room, and I'm psyched to get the opportunity to ask someone like you questions all these years later. Congratulations on the new book, and thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk in a few weeks.
Thanks so much, Pete. And you are absolutely a journalist, because that's what journalism is. So,
I'll take it.
All right.
All right, there he goes, Mike Grunwald. Go say hi to him on Blue Sky and on all the rest of the platforms linked in the show notes. Go get the book. Pre-order it now. We are eating the earth, the race to fix our food system and save our climate. You got any questions or arguments? Please let me know, because I'll be talking with Michael again later on this month. At the end of the month, the book comes out on July 1st. That is it for today. Can't do it without you. Thank you so much for your support. And I'll see you at tonight's hangout. If you're still listening, you bumblebees here at the end, I'm so grateful to you. And I will talk to you tomorrow, tonight, some other time, anytime on the Discord platform. Be well, be good, be present, be mindful. John Carroll, take us out. Go buy the album right now, johncarroll.org. Bye-bye.
Knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. We got to rise up, you got to stand up. Stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.